On July 4th, firefighter Thomas Araguz died in the line of duty. But quickly, media attention shifted from a fallen hero to his grieving widow. Who is Nikki Araguz? Is she legally his wife? And did Thomas know of her unique journey? In a moment, Nikki will join us. But the attention this story has received prompts us to look deeper and ask, how do we assign sex to the one out of every 100 children born outside the standard definition of male or female? And how do we decide who, in the state of Texas, is eligible to marry? Tonight, we look beyond the headlines to better understand, both legally and medically, how we define man and woman. I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8. Nikki Araguz joins us now, and first off, before we begin, our sympathy out to you in the loss of your husband. We're very sorry about that.
Thank you.
We're also very concerned how when somebody loses someone to suddenly be thrown into the media spotlight, and we hope that we don't add to your stress in this conversation. And as we have said, and we'll continue to throughout the show, we're not here to retry the case, but we're here to understand your story and where you came from. And I guess my first question is, you consider yourself to be a woman. End of story.
Right.
People out there are assuming and confused by the difference between transgender, intersex. What is the classification you find yourself in? How do you define who Nikki is?
I simply am a heterosexual woman. That's how I define myself. I'm not a medical professional, but I know that I have been diagnosed with a partial androgen insensitivity syndrome, and that falls under a classification medically as a transgendered syndrome.
And folks seem to have problems getting past the idea, and they assume that when we talk in these terms, that it's someone who was a male, born a male, grew up as a male, somehow felt they weren't a male, so they had sexual reassignment surgery. That is a different condition than what you went through, correct?
Completely. In my growing up, even in my early years, as young as 3 and 4, my parents started to notice that I was not developing into a boy, that I was developing into a girl, and sought medical professionals. And late 70s, early 80s, nobody knew what was going on. And so they just allowed me to continue to develop into the woman I am today.
A lot of people ask the questions and are trying to figure out if your husband knew, when he knew. Outside of all of that, because court is deciding all of that, and you know your story of it. I'm curious how you breach the subject with someone when you meet them. When you are developing an intimate relationship with someone, how this topic comes up and how do you explain it?
You know, that's something that I had to learn. And as a teenager, I broached it with fear and anxiety and a lot of denial and hiding it. Not fully understanding where I was, and also just being an immature teenager, not knowing how to answer those types of questions. But when I reached a certain point at 19 and realized that, you know, honesty up front about this medical condition and the aspects of my life needed to be spoken up front and honestly with whomever I was going to have any sort of intimate relationship, whether it be a close friend or someone who I was going to be involved with intimately.
The reactions you saw surprised you, what you expected, not what you expected?
I actually was, it was generally always just accepted, and you know, the response was more of a, so what? Mm-hmm. You know, much like my husband Thomas responded, I love you anyway.
I think people watching would say, how? I think the concept is so foreign to a lot of folks that if their spouse were to tell them, I used to be something different than I was, that they would be caught off guard.
But see, I don't think I was ever something different than I am. I may have been identified by one little letter as something different than other than the female that I am now, but there was no difference in my personality and in my my attitude and the way I communicate.
And I think that was the point I'm trying to get at, is that when you are in a relationship with someone, there is so much more than just the perceived physical, that there is the person So when things like this come out, I think in a lot of situations people figure out a way to deal with what they're confronted with, as opposed to being fearful or scared. You're still the person you were 2 minutes ago before you said that.
Right, exactly. And that's what Thomas's heart was, compassionate and loving, and that's the relationship we had.
How did you two meet?
We met at church.
And the reaction, love at first sight? What happened? Not love at first sight?
It was definitely attraction at first sight. And thank you. I love sharing that memory. A month ago, yesterday was the anniversary of his death. And I miss him greatly. Mm-hmm. We spent, on our way out of church, we said hello to each other on our way in, and on our way out, he invited me to eat breakfast, and we went and spent 3 hours talking, and what turned into laughter, and, this just a terrific development of our relationship.
A lot of people are surprised by the attention this is getting. I'm sure you're at the top of the list at who you are. You ran for mayor of your town.
I did.
Which makes me think that there wasn't a part of you hiding or shut away. Did you expect during the mayoral race that this would all come out?
Honestly, we lived such a quiet, private, life. I published a magazine. It was very well known in our community, and I participated a lot in community events and activities. And I embraced the community of Wharton and loved it so much that I wanted to help it. That's why I started the company I did. And that's why I, supported my husband through that, and through going to school to be the firefighter, police officer, EMT that he came to be during our marriage.
Mm-hmm. But at no time did you think, I'm running for mayor, people are going to find out this secret. Did you internalize
I guess I
it
never
that way?
ever really thought of it as a secret, or, but I guess I had put a part of my past behind me. After the surgery, it was something that I didn't think about anymore, because it was the birth defect that had been removed, and it was just like gone.
And again, I want to clarify for our audience, when you say it was the birth defect, we are not talking about a fully developed, all-male individual going and having a sexual reassignment surgery.
That would not be at all an accurate description of what happened for me, because I was an underdeveloped, and not past the age of 2 or 3 years old did I develop anatomically genitalia.
A lot with this story is being morphed into gay marriage now, and they're talking about ramifications from that. How do you view marriage?
I view marriage as any loving commitment between two people, period. Yeah. And I'm not trying to be a platform for anyone except for my own marriage at this point. Whatever comes as a result of that, and helping anybody else be able to have equal civil liberties, then so be it.
How does the poster child term feel to you?
I don't like that. I realize that's probably where I'm at. But I don't necessarily, that's not what I signed up for.
Right.
I was a housewife and, ran a magazine and loved my husband and my children and rode my horse. This was my life prior to my husband's death. And with the lawsuit that was brought on, I was thrust into the media and
being put into the spotlight that you have. I'm sure that you get both sides of the spectrum reacting to you. How do you weather through that?
Honestly, it's very difficult. I'm still grieving the loss of my husband, and it's preventing me from doing that in a lot of ways. But I weather through it because I believe so strongly in my marriage and in the love that Thomas and I shared, that I'm not going to stop fighting for the truth and the equality.
Yeah. Well, we thank you so much for taking the time to come in and share your story with us, helping our audience understand a little bit more of what's going on. And again, our sympathy for the loss of your husband.
Thank you.
Nikki Araguz, thank you.
Thanks.
We appreciate Nikki for sharing her story with us tonight, but she's just one of many individuals in today's society where the determination of sex is not as simple as it may seem. Joining us tonight to further discuss this topic are Mitchell Katine, attorney, Katine Nechman L.L.P., and Dr. Lefkothea Karaviti, professor of Pediatrics, Baylor College of Medicine. Welcome to both of you. As we have established, this is a very tricky area, both legally and medically. And to start off with, I think the first area we need to address is the difference between transgendered individuals and intersexed. And Doctor, I'll let you start with that.
Thank you for inviting us here. This is a great opportunity to transmit some information that I think the public can find interesting for the years to come. And the definition and the distinction between the transgender versus individuals who have sexual differentiation disorders or medical conditions is the following. A transgender individual is a male or female who decides or feels actually that they are trapped in the wrong body.
So they are fully developed male or female.
Correct. Like, take an example, is like a girl who comes to your office and says, I don't think I'm a female, I want to change my sex and I want to be a boy. I feel like a boy, but I look like a girl and I want to stop looking like a girl because I don't feel this is what I fit.
So then they have sexual gender...
They have a gender identity disorder, which is a totally different category. And
they have sexual reassignment surgery where they are recrafted to fit the category they feel they best belong in.
Yeah, this is totally complex issue, and what I can tell you is for how the definition is, it is rather a gender identity disorder that needs to be dealt with a whole group of psychiatrists and psychologists, but these individuals clearly do not have any physical problems in terms that the hormones are appropriate for their body, their development of the private area, external genitalia is normal. The internal organs, reproductive organs are intact and they are concordant with their female or male sex assignment.
Now on the other side, intersex, how does that differ from transsexual?
So that we like to use instead of intersex, we like to use conditions or disorders of sexual differentiation from the point of view that these individuals have a medical condition in which for several reasons, which could be chromosomes or endocrine reasons, which means hormonal reasons, or other unidentified reasons have problems in terms of their development, and there is a discordance between their chromosomes and their hormones, or a discordance between their chromosomes and the appearance of their private area.
So they could have the XX chromosomes that are traditionally of a woman, but have male genitalia,
That's
or
correct.
vice versa. Female genitalia, but have an XY chromosome.
That's correct. So you take an individual who has 46XX chromosomal makeup, which is classically and legally consistent with a female in the old traditional approach. And those individuals, though, for several reasons, one could be a molecular problem that this 46XX individual, for example, can have a piece of the Y chromosome attached to one of the X's. That individual is going to be developing as a male despite the fact that there are female chromosomes.
Okay, and do we consider this, and I hate the terminology, but I need to ask, a birth defect?
We consider it a congenital medical condition, which actually is in the area of sexual differentiation and development disorder. It is a developmental process which started at birth and before birth, and that's what we consider. But if you consider that as a chromosomal problem, yes, it could be considered as a congenital condition.
Okay, I want to go over to Mitchell for a second here now. Legally speaking, what defines a man or a woman in this culture? How do we term this? From where do we get it?
Well, here in Texas, there is one case that has dealt with this called the Littleton case. And in that case, it was dealing with someone who had had the surgery and other appearance adjustments.
So a transgendered
individual. And in that case, the judge focused on the chromosomes or the alleged chromosomes. I don't think there was actually a test done, but they believe the chromosomes were male. The person was originally born a male, and the judge says that as a male, Christy cannot be married to another male. Her marriage to Jonathan was invalid, and that there are some things that we cannot will into being. So that is the one case that we have here in Texas. Now,
one thing I continue to hear out, especially surrounding the Araguz case, is the fact that the Supreme Court of Texas validated that stance. But I've heard other people say it never went to the Supreme Court.
Correct.
They did not hear it.
That is correct. It did not go to the Supreme Court. This is a court out of the Court of Appeals, and so it did not go to the Supreme Court. That's where it stopped.
Now, there's talk of the family code now having been updated within the last year or so.
That's correct. Under the family code, under the application for marriage license statute, it was updated, and under the section 2.005, where you have to prove your identity and age, it says that the proof must be established by, and then it gives a long list of everything from your driver's license to passports. And one of those things which has been added to the list says, an original or certified copy of a court order relating to the applicant's name change or sex change. And so my interpretation of that, and I'm not a family lawyer who uses this, but in reading that, my interpretation is that if you have a valid court order that says that John Doe is Jane Doe and is now a female, if that's what the court order says, then that is recognized as the authority, and everybody, including the court clerk, needs to follow that.
Okay, and just for the sake of giving all the information on the table, in the Araguz case, the other side is actually saying that that documentation is used simply to verify who the person was, and that's what they're arguing on that side.
Well, as you know, we're not here to discuss that, and I'm not commenting on that, but I understand what you said.
I just want to make sure people hear that there are differences of opinions in that area. When a child is born, and my understanding of it is a doctor looks, and what they see is what they check. They see what looks like a baby boy. It is a baby boy on the birth certificate. Is that a safe way to assume that what you're seeing is the sex you're seeing?
For the majority of the cases, for a healthy baby who is born, and for the majority of the cases, this is the common practice. You look, you evaluate the baby, you feel if there is in the case in which you are ready to assign somebody to a male, you have really to document that the baby has descended testes in the scrotal sacs and to feel that the baby has an appropriate size of a penis, which is the phallus, that is the definition of how the extended genitalia are differentiated between a boy and a girl. And if that's all clear, that's when you assign somebody's birth certificate as being a boy.
When does somebody like you come into play? When do they know they need to talk to you?
They need to talk to me when, for example, in this case, that somebody identifies a newborn baby as having a penis, for example, but they go to feel the testes and there is no testes there. So they say then, here I have a baby who has a fully developed penis. I'm taking one case scenario, but there are no testes. What is going on? At which point you have to come in and evaluate this baby and think what would be the scenarios in which the testes are not there. And if the testes are not there, should you wait and evaluate this baby before you proceed to give the sex assignment as a male? And that's a process that you have to start right then and then to evaluate whether this baby, it would be appropriate to have a male sex assignment.
There, if I remember correctly, that in the past, what used to happen is it was easiest, they thought, to convert the child to female. It was most convenient in early medicine to do that. And now the school of thought is different in that area.
That's a very complex question because answering it is easier to convert. It means that you have to take into account several complex components of sexual differentiation before you go ahead to assign somebody and to say, I'm going to make my decision based on how easy the surgery is. That's not enough because there are several components coming into that you have to evaluate and to see how many components of sexual differentiation are in concordance with the sex assignment that you are going to give to that baby. Now,
sum it up quickly to say majority rules. If more of the pieces fall to the female, that becomes female. More goes male, it becomes male.
I don't think it is the answer so simple. I don't think majority. It is a lot of components that you have to look within an ethical framework for how this baby is going to be assigned. Surgery and reconstruction and the functionality of the extended genitalia can be one of the components, but it's not the single component.
Okay. The doctor mentioned to me, which I thought was interesting, is though that you do want to have an assignment. That ambiguity, you can't take the child to school or to a daycare and say, here's my child, we don't know if it's a male or female. That's not an appropriate thing to do, and I thought that was an interesting thing that she told me.
Let me continue with you then in this area and say, if we can acknowledge as a community, and the medical community already acknowledges, that there are shades of categorization. As you said before we started, there's pink and there's blue, and then there's all the shades between that. What does that do then to understanding legally what male and female are? I mean, do we need then those classifications if medically we know people can fall within a range?
Ernie, I believe that at some point, and it may be sooner rather than later in light of yesterday's California court decision, that we are going to get away throughout this entire country with requiring marriage to be between a man and a woman. As long as they are consenting adults who are not biologically connected with one another that would then have medical consequences, then they will be permitted to marry. Now, that decision has not been made yet and will probably not come for many years, but hopefully, eventually the Supreme Court will decide that. In Texas, it is prohibited to have same-sex marriages, as it is in most states in this country. But as we're hearing, it's very hard to determine who is all male or all female.
And for people who think we're being way theoretical here, all you have to do is look back at the last Olympics and realize these issues are coming up in our culture.
Right.
So I cannot speak specifically about this athlete who went through a lot of trouble because nobody really knows the specifics about her either, despite the fact that she was accused of being in an advantage probably because of high levels of testosterone. That was the concept. But I really don't know the facts on that. But still, for the Olympics, it is an issue, again, how you define sex and how you actually, somebody who has been living as a female, she should be participating with her peers as a female athlete.
Legally, why do, we've got 30 seconds left, so I hate to throw this question out last second. Why do we categorize legally male and female?
The arguments are from a traditional and religious perspective. That's the arguments on that side. But from a state civil marriage position, those distinctions are not necessary. For a legal marriage, and under our Constitution, I believe that is what will ultimately succeed, and we will get away from those distinctions, at least from a civil perspective.
Fascinating area of discussion. Thank you both for coming in. That does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for joining us, and have a great week.